Welcome back to the Snowpoint. Today we're going to be talking about a deck from 2010 called Gliscor. Only one was played at the World Championships, and it had a 2-5 finish, which is actually pretty awful. And I think that's just because the deck has some inherent flaws. It is a really cool deck, but in the meta that it's in, it definitely has some weaknesses, and we'll go over that when we get to some specific cards in the list. But let's get right into it. So starting off with 4 Gligar. Gligar's got 60 HP, a single retreat, a resistance to fighting, and a weakness to water. The first attack's called Light Poison, so for free, you do 10, flip a coin. Of tails, this deck does nothing. If heads, the defending Pokemon's now poisoned. So I mean, a potential poison and 10 damage for free is definitely really decent on your first turn. And then the second attack, jump on for a fighting, flip a coin. Of heads, this deck does 10 damage plus 10 more damage. 2, alright attacks. They could be better, but they definitely could be worse attacks as well. And then you play 3 Gliscor. So Gliscor's got 80 HP, a single retreat, a resistance to fighting, and a weakness to water. The first attack for free, it's called Burning Poison. Choose either burned or poisoned. The defending Pokemon is now affected by that special condition. And then you can return Gliscor and all cards attached to your hand. So this attack is really good because of the level X. And we'll get to that in a second, but it's just like really powerful because you get to put a special condition on your opponent, and then you can return the cards and return the Pokemon and all cards attached to your hand. And you can put something like a Spiritomb up. You play a bunch of walls that like you can chuck in the active. So definitely a really powerful attack in this deck. And kind of the main strategy is Burning Poison. It's a very important card in the deck. And Pester is really good as well. So for fighting a colorless 40, if the defending Pokemon is affected by a special condition, the attack does 40 plus 40 more. So being able to hit for 80 is definitely good in niche situations as well. You also play a level X Gliscor. So Gliscor level X, it's got 110 HP, free retreat, which is really nice, a resistance to fighting, and a weakness to water. So the Poke Power is called Shoot Poison. When you level X a Gliscor, you get to leave your opponent's active Pokemon paralyzed and poisoned. So that combo with the return to hand is really good because you get to go Shoot Poison, you're paralyzed and poisoned, use the attack that I get the Gliscor level X back, and then if you have a Gliscor on your bench, you can just evolve to another Gliscor level X, and then you keep your paralyzed chain going, which is like really cool. And it's like kind of the strategy of the deck is as soon as you get that chain going, you should have the perfect lock on your opponent. Should is the important word there. There's a lot of things in the meta that kind of kill your strategy, but Shoot Poison is great. Night Slash is the attack on Gliscor level X, so for fighting a colorless it does 60, and then you may switch Gliscor with one of your bench Pokemon. Also a really good attack because you can, instead of bringing it back to your hand, if you just want to keep it out, you can Night Slash for fighting damage, and then switch with a Spiritomb and keep your opponent trainer locked, or a Shuckle and force them to not have special energy. There's a lot of options that you have in this deck to switch into, so definitely a really cool level X and a really important part of the deck as well. So you play 4 Spiritomb as well. So Spiritomb's got 60 HP, a single retreat, a resistance to colorless. The Poke Body on it is a really important part of this deck. It's called Keystone Seal. So as long as Spiritomb is your active Pokemon, each player can't play trainer cards from his or her hand. So really good. You don't play a ton of trainer cards. You do play some, but honestly, when you have the ability to retreat Spiritomb, you can retreat it, put the Gliscor up, and then use your trainer cards. It's really good. And Darkness Grace is awesome too. It just lets you set up your board really quickly. So for free, you get to search your deck for a Pokemon that evolves from one of your benched basic Pokemon, put it onto that Pokemon, and then you put a damage counter on Spiritomb. So just really early game setup. That's awesome. You gotta search for a Claydol, and then all of a sudden you're drawing cards. Just a really, really good card. And being able to chuck it in the active when you're switching out of your Gliscors is really, really powerful as well. Okay, getting to the Pokemon consistency now. So you play 2 Baltoy. You play the fighting type Baltoy. I mean, you can attack with it spin turn, but honestly, Psychic Balance is just really good. So it's got 50 HP, a single retreat, weakness to grass, Psychic Balance for 1 colorless. If you have less cards in your hand than your opponent, draw cards until you have the same number of cards as your opponent. So I mean, if you're bricking and you only have like Pokemon, you just bench your Pokemon, attach an energy, and then draw some cards and hopefully find something. So definitely a really good attack. Spin turn you can use in this deck as well because you play fighting energy. For a fighting colorless 20, and then switch Baltoy with one of your bench Pokemon. That's actually pretty good if you have to use this attack, because you can just chuck a Spiritomb active, and then you're kind of you're going with the strategy of the game, so definitely a useful attack in a situation where you have to use it. You play 2 Claydol as well. So Claydol's got 80 HP, 2 retreat, and a weakness to grass. The power is called Cosmic Power, which is an amazing power. So Cosmic Power says, once during your turn, you can take up to 2 cards from your hand, put them to the bottom of your deck, and then draw until you have 6 cards in your hand. So just a really good consistency. And as soon as you hit that with the Spiritomb, like you get a Baltoy out, and then you Spiritomb, get the Claydol, and then all of a sudden you're drawing a bunch of cards every turn, and you're seeing cards. A really just a staple consistency card in a lot of evolution decks in the format. A really, really powerful card. Okay, so getting into some of the more techy Pokemon. Unown Q is not particularly a tech, but it is so you can put the Spiritomb active and keep retreating from it. So you get free return on the Spiritomb. Unown Q essentially works like this. You can, if it's on your bench, you can activate it as a tool and then put it onto one of your Pokemon, and then that Pokemon has 1 colorless less retreat. So the Spiritomb has free retreat. You put the Gliscor up, you know, bring it back to hand so that you can level X next turn, and they're paralyzed, and then you put this up so they're trainer locked as well, so they can't just like poke a turn or switch out of it. It's kind of the purpose of the lock. Really good. The flaw with that though is a couple things. So the first is Dialga G level X shuts off Spiritomb, so that's kind of not amazing for you. When they're not trainer locked, they just get to poke a turn, and you know, paralyzes whatever when you can just count the turns until they knock you out, and then you poke a turn. So now that you just wasted all those turns, and so you know, it's definitely a interesting part about this deck is you have to deal with Poketurn, you also have to deal with Dialga, you have to deal with Luxray as well. If you have a Spiritomb and you're active and you're locking your opponent, if your opponent finds a Luxray GL level X, they can just bright look something else active so that they're not trainer locked anymore, and then they can use those items like the Poketurns and the switches to get out of paralysis. So there are some inherent flaws. I mean, especially with Luxray being as good as it is and Dialga being as good as it is, this deck struggles against SP, but on the other hand, there is some decks that this deck can do really well against if they don't have counters, or if they like depend on retreating a lot. It can be definitely a really good matchup for some decks. Okay, so you play one Uxie as well. So 70 HP, single retreat, and a weakness to Psychic. So setup is the Poke Power. When you bench Uxie, you get to draw up until you have 7 cards in your hand. So really good attack, or good power. Staple, it's in like every deck in this era. It's a really good card. Psychic Restore is good to know as well. So for 1 colorless, you can do 20 damage and then put Uxie and all cards attached to the bottom of your deck. Good to hit for Psychic weakness. And again, you're sticking with that strategy of, you know, just doing damage and then sticking a Spiritomb active so that you can keep that trainer lock. You also play an Azelf. So Azelf's got 70 HP, a single retreat, and a weakness to Psychic. Time Walk is the power on Azelf, really good power. Staple as well. When you bench Azelf, you get to search your prizes for a Pokemon, put it in your hand, and then switch a card from your hand with that card that you just took out of your prizes. Really good. I mean, you need to get that Gliscor level X. It's a really important part of the deck. Finding your Claydols as well as your unknowns. There's just so many things in the deck. Like, you run a 4-3-1 because you have to play the level X. So if you prize any of your Gliscors, it can be really bad. So being able to get access, especially the level X, that's the main reason Azelf's in there, but being able to access all of your prizes can be really good as well. You play one Shuckle as well. So Shuckle's got 60 HP, a single retreat, and a weakness to fire. The Pokebody is the reason you play it. So Pot Shell, prevent all effects of attack, including damage done to Shuckle by your opponent's Pokemon that has any special energy attached to it. So this is a tech for some specific decks. I mean, a lot of SP decks play basic energy, but if you get your opponent to a point where all of their resources are gone for their basic energy, then you can just chuck this guy active, and then they can't do anything to it because they play DCEs, they play calls, they probably play like 2 Psychic, 3 Lightning. If you can get those Lightnings and Psychics off the board, this Pokemon's essentially untouchable. And you can just you can put an Unown Q on it, and then you keep retreating and keep, you know, burning poisoning and shoot poisoning and just doing a lot of stuff to your opponent's active. And if they can't, you know, Luxray Bright Look around you, if this is a late point in the game, Pot Shell can be a really good win condition. So it's good to know that you have that in your deck. And against some matchups, I mean, depends on the deck that you're playing against. Some decks only play like 2 basic energy, like Steelix only plays 2 basic metal, and they also play 4 call, 4 DCE, 4 special metal. So Shuckle's a really effective tech against something like that you can't even hit for poison damage. Steelix is a really tough matchup, but you can hit it for damage and then just switch with the Shuckle active. So I mean, kind of depends. If they have 2 basic metals, they can hit it, but if they don't, they can't. And it's just really good against some particular matchups. Okay, so getting into the stadiums now. So 3 broken time space, really important stadium to the deck. It lets you just go Gligar, Gliscor. You can't level X in the same turn, unfortunately, but it lets you go Gligar, Gliscor, and then you can just put it up, bring it back to your hand, and then you put a Spiritomb up. If you don't have another Gligar, it just lets you bench that all back down again and keep the lot going, or keep the attacks going, which is really nice. Also, getting out your Claydol really quickly is important as well, as the deck does need some stuff to set up. You also play a Moonlight Stadium. So Moonlight Stadium is just to give your Spiritombs free retreat. It also gives your Uxie and Azelf free retreat as well. But yeah, it's just really important to be able to switch that Spiritomb out of there. And when you play 2 quick at a Moonlight Stadium, it's pretty often that you're able to do that. Okay, so you play 4 Pokeblower Plus as well. Really interesting card. So Pokeblower Plus says you may play 2 Pokeblower Plus at the same time. If you play 1 Pokeblower Plus, flip a coin of heads, put 1 damage counter on one of your opponent's Pokemon. If you play 2 at the same time, choose one of your opponent's Pokemon and switch it with one of your opponent's active Pokemon. So great for locking stuff. I mean, depending on what your opponent has, being able to Burning Poison? Yeah, Burning Poison. You can Burning Poison like a Claydol, bring up a Claydol, Burning Poison it, and then kind of slows your opponent down. They're not drawing those cards. Chuck a Spiritomb active, and it just like denies their hand. This deck does a lot of really good hand denial. I mean, not compared to some other decks, but being able to lock down the board and then also being able to lock your opponent's hand playing Spiritomb, it is a fair amount of locking in this deck. And when you have the power to bring up like a Claydol or something bulky on your opponent's bench that they don't want active, it just means that it buys you those turns before you can finally set your lockup. And you play 3 Pokemon Reversal as well. Also for that, I mean, stalling is great, but also you need to attack certain things in certain matchups, and it's important what you attack because you're not doing a ton of damage. You're doing like poison damage, burn damage, and you're paralyzing your opponent. Sometimes you're hitting them for damage, but honestly, a lot of the time you're just hitting them for like special condition damage. So being able to control what you bring up, it also lets you shut off powers as well, which is really nice. You see like a Gardevoir on their board that they're using Telepass with. You can bring it up, hit it with a burning poison, and then all of a sudden they can't use Telepass anymore. So definitely a really good part of the hand lock on that deck as well. Play 2 Premier Ball. So Premier Ball is just to find your Gliscor level X, and then when your Gliscor level X, if it happens to go down, getting it back is a really essential part of the deck. So you play 2 just so you're consistent with it. You play 2 Expert Belt as well. So Expert Belt gives you plus 20 damage and plus 20 HP. So it lets your Gliscor level X's hit for a bunch of damage. You can also Pester for like 100, which is really good as well. Gliscor level X hitting for 80 and switching to the bench is definitely really decent for 2 energy. And then giving it that extra HP, 130, is not insanely impossible to knock out, but it is kind of difficult to knock out in this meta. Okay, so you play 1 Luxury Ball as well. Luxury Ball lets you search for any Pokemon in your deck that isn't level X Pokemon. So you find every card that isn't Gliscor level X, and you already play Premier Balls and a bunch of supporter cards to find your Gliscor. So Luxury just finds any other card. Really, really good card. You play a Night Maintenance as well. So Night Maintenance says shuffle your discard pile, or search your discard pile for 3 in any combination of basic energy and Pokemon cards, and then shuffle them into your deck. So being able to get Gliscors that have been knocked out back in the deck is really great. Getting Spiritombs that have been knocked out back is good. A lot of times your Claydols go down because Garchomp snipes it out, so being able to get that back is good as well. And depending on the matchup, being able to get Unown Qs and Shuckle back can be important as well. Okay, so getting to the supporter cards now. So starting off with 4 Bebe Search. Bebe Search, take a card from your hand, put it on the top of your deck, search your deck for a Pokemon card, put it in your hand, and then shuffle your deck. So really good Pokemon consistency, helps you find that Gliscor level X, also gets your evolution Gliscors, so that's the main reason that you find those. It gets your Claydol, I mean it gets anything really, but Bebe Search, the difference between Bebes and Roseannes is Roseannes search for basics, and Bebes can find those evolution cards or level X cards that you need. You do play 4 Roseanne's Research as well, just like lots of Pokemon Search. It's really good. You play a bunch of Call as well. Finding basics is not an issue in this deck. But yeah, 4 Roseanne's Research. Search your deck for 2 in any combination of basic energy and basic Pokemon, put them in your hand. So really, really good card. And then you play 2 Looker's Investigation as well. It's kind of an interesting card. The reason you play this in your deck is because, like I was saying, there are opportunities that your opponent has to break your lock, like for example a Luxury Geo level X or like a Dialga G level X, and Lookers kind of just gives you that option to say, hey, I know that you have Dialga G Poketurn in your hand, and I really don't want Dialga G level X Poketurn in your hand, and I really do not want you to have that. So it lets you like hand disrupt your opponent a little bit and just see what kind of options they have. You know, if they have a Luxury level X and like a Poketurn, any combination of those can be really bad, and taking it out of your opponent's hand so that you can keep that lock going is definitely a really good part of this deck. And that's why you play Lookers. I mean, being able to shuffle draw 5 yourself is okay as well, but the main reason you play Lookers is because your opponent does have outs to break your lock, and you need to, if they do have those outs in their hand, you need to shuffle them back because that is no good for you. Okay, so you play 2 Cyrus Initiative as well. Same thing. So Cyrus Initiative, flip 2 coins. If either of them are heads, look at your opponent's hand. For each heads, choose one of those cards, and then they shuffle their, they put them at the bottom of their deck in any order. So and same thing as Looker's Investigation, right? Like your opponent has resources that they need. This Cyrus's is just a more accurate like targeting of those. Like if your opponent has a Dialga G level X in their hand, you say, no, that's actually going to the bottom of your deck. I'm going to keep this Spiritomb, Keystone Sealed live. So it gives you some outs to your opponent's outs to your lock break that they have in their hand. Okay, so we're getting into the energy now. So you play 4 Call. Call is just really staple in evolution decks. Really good card. You can attach Call to one of your Pokemon, and then if it's your active Pokemon, you can activate Call. Search your deck for 2 basic Pokemon, and then put them onto your bench, and then your turn ends. So a Call and a Spiritomb is really great because you can go for something like a Baltoy and a Gligar, and then next turn you can evolve the Gligar, and then Burning Poison, and then you can evolve the Claydol, and then start doing Claydol. Or if you miss everything, you can just Call and then Spiritomb for a Claydol and then start drawing other stuff as well. So Call's a really great part of this deck for sure. You play 3 Warp Energy as well. Keeping your switches is really good. So it lets you switch out of that Spiritomb, so you can put a Warp on Spiritomb, and then you get 2 retreats out of it, essentially, because you go Warp, and then you have that energy attachment on there as well. So you Warp to switch. When you attach Warp to your active, it switches it with one of your bench Pokemon. So you put a Warp on the Spiritomb, put the Gliscor up, attack with the Gliscor, put the Spiritomb back, and then you can just retreat with a Warp next turn. So it gives you a lot of switching options in this deck, and that can be really important when you are needing to switch every turn to be attacking. And then you play 3 Fighting as well. You're able to attack with Gliscor with this, and Gliscor does have some useful attacks. Pester is really good, and the one on the Gliscor level X is definitely relevant as well. So being able to attack with those, and you play Roseanne, so you can search it. A lot of your attacks are free, which is really nice. Like Burning Poison is free. Shoot Poison costs a Fighting the colors though, so being able to, or not Shoot Poison. What's the one on the Gliscor level X? Night Slash. Night Slash is a Fighting in colors. So, you have a Call, or you have a Warp, and a Fighting, and then all of a sudden you're Night Slashing. But yeah, this has been Gliscor from 2010. If you have any questions about the deck, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to get to them. But thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.